So in previous videos we have been looking at how to create NURBS curves. We looked at how you could go to create polygon primitives and you could create a circle, for example, and then you could come in here and adjust the circle and create different shapes. We've also looked at the Create Curve Tools CV Curve tool, which you can use to basically draw out any shape that you want using a more free-form approach. In this video, we're going to take a look at yet another way that we can create some NURBS curves, a method that might be beneficial for you when you create your neon sign. And what we're going to do is look at the Type tool. So I'm going to go to Create, Type, and this is what we get, 3D Type. Now, if I look in the attribute editor here and I go to the appropriate tab, in this case it's the Type 1 tab, you'll see that here I can actually type the text that I want. In this case I'm just going to say neon sign. And we can also take a look at different font types. Now these are going to depend on the fonts that you actually have installed on your computer, but what you'll notice is that there is a drop-down list here, and we can look at the different fonts that we have available to us. Let's try this one, this Palace Script font. So currently this is geometry, but what I actually want are NURBS curves. So what I'm going to do is here under the Geometry tab, you'll notice that there's this button here that says Create Curves from Type. And I'll click on that, and it will give me some NURBS curves. I'm going to delete the geometry that I have here because I don't need it, and we'll take a look at just the NURBS curves that we have. And here they are. You can see that if I select one of these curves and I go to its components, we have control vertices. Just like we did with our freeform curves that we created earlier. So in another previous video, I showed you how you could attach brush strokes to a NURBS curve. And we'll try that with these curves here and see if we run into any problems. So I currently have this curve here. It's an enclosed curve. And as we discussed in an earlier video, neon signs are not enclosed. They're not enclosed shapes like that. They have a beginning, they have an end. But we'll work with this and we'll see what we get. So I have my curve selected, and what I will do is I will go to Generate, Curve Utilities, Attach Brush to Curves. And this will create the geometry for what might be my neon sign. Now, you'll remember from the previous video that this is not a polygon mesh, not yet. We'll convert it into a polygon mesh later. Currently, it is still a brush stroke. But if you remember from the previous video, there are different settings here. For instance, under the default brush, we can change the brush width and make it thinner or thicker depending on the needs. We can also go to stroke shape, and we can come here to sample density, and we can bring down its resolution. or increase its resolution, again, depending on the needs of our project. So I'm going to select the rest of these curves here. You can see that, in fact, it's a number of different curves. So select them. And once again, I'll go to Generate, Curve Utilities, Attach Brush to Curves. And here's what we get. One thing you'll notice is the G here doesn't look very good. There's some strangeness happening here. There are a couple different ways we could try to resolve that. I'll select the stroke itself, and we can go to the stroke shape tab for it, and we could try increasing the sample density and see if that fixes this problem. It might not. Let's try increasing it, and yes, in fact, that does a pretty good job. Perhaps I'll bring it to an even higher number, and that could work. That could work for us. I'm going to undo that because I want to show you another method that we can use if you end up with these kind of problems. And to demonstrate that and make it a little easier to select what I want to select, I'm going to come over here to Show, and I'm just going to temporarily hide the strokes in this viewport. That'll make it a little easier for me to select the NURBS curve that I want to select. And I'll show the strokes again. I have my curve selected. And what I'd like you to take note of is that it is 99 spans at 1 degree. Now, I went over spans and degrees in an earlier video on NURBS curves, so I'm not going to really talk about that too much here. But another thing I demonstrated in an earlier video was how you can rebuild a curve. And let's try rebuilding this curve and see if that resolves some of these issues here. So with the curve selected, I'm going to go to Curve, Rebuild. I'll open up its settings here. I'll just reset it to the default. Currently it's set to number of spans 4 at 3 cubic. That's not going to be enough. This is what we'll get if I use that setting. I'll undo that. What I think I'll do is I'll leave it at 3 cubic to get nice smooth curves. And in fact, 99 spans, I'm going to keep it at 99 spans, but I'll still rebuild this curve. We could try a smaller number and see if we can get by with something smaller. Let's see what we get if we try 40. It's going to simplify the form. It's going to simplify the shape, just so you know. And maybe that's not quite enough. I'll just undo that, and I'm going to go ahead and just bring it up to, I'll bring it up to 99. We'll keep the same number, and I'll apply that. And that starts to look a little bit better. That might work better for my neon sign. Now you'll remember from the previous video that these are actually brush strokes. They're not polygon objects. I'm going to select all the brush strokes, and I'm going to go to Modify, Convert, and we'll find the Paint Effects to Polygons, open up its tool settings. The one setting I would like you to make sure that you have yours set to is Quad Output. That will give you, I think, a little easier output. That'll be a little easier to work with. And I will apply. It doesn't look like anything changed, but in fact, these are now polygon objects with vertices, faces, edges. It also makes assigning a material to it a little bit easier. And this will be a little bit of review from the previous video. I'll go to my Hypershade. All these materials are simply materials that are assigned to the original brush strokes. Once again, I'll make a blend and select my blend. Perhaps this time we'll make it a green neon sign. I'll change the incandescence to green and perhaps actually bring the color down a little. We'll get its color primarily from the incandescence. And I will bring up the glow a little bit. Select my geometry. Missed a little bit. Select my geometry. And I will assign it. I'm going to right click on my material and say assign to selection. And here it is. So if we were to render that out using Maya software, we will get this. Now I think the type tool is very valuable. It's very useful. However, to be quite honest, my preference for this assignment, for creating a neon sign, is actually to just write out the text freeform instead of using the fonts. It's a little less perfect, but I think that actually lends to the aesthetic a little bit better, and it makes it more like a real neon sign, which would not be these enclosed shapes. So for instance, let's say I wanted to write out this part of the neon sign where it says Eon. I'm not going to do the N here. I might go to my CV curve tool and simply write it out. I of course can go in here to my component mode and start tweaking it and refining it. If I were doing this for real, I think I would probably spend a little more time on it, but I think that's good for the purposes of this demonstration. For the neon signs, I actually prefer a less perfect font than these available ones. That's why I think maybe freeform writing it out might be more effective for your neon signs, but that's really up to you to decide. But with my curve selected, the other benefit to this is that this is a single curve, whereas this is composed of a number of different curves. Okay, but with my curve selected, I'll go to Generate, Paint Utilities, Attach Brush to Curves. If I wish to, I can increase or decrease the brush size, or brush width rather. Once again, I can change the sample density if I need to. I'm going to convert it into a polygon object. And I will once again apply my shader to my geometry. And there it is. So that's a little bit about the type tool, a useful tool in Maya for creating text and for creating NURBS curves. I hope that you found this video informative, and thank you for watching.